Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is the top 5 white card draw cards. You know, this is sort of a one-off. I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting? Everyone's always talking about white card draw. How about I make a video talking about what cards are there actually? What is available to you if you're making a mono white deck, maybe even a Boros deck, because red doesn't draw cards very good either. That's basically where you would use most of these cards. So what is available to you, right? This is one thing that people like to talk about a lot, is white can't really draw cards. So if you want to, what is available to you? I didn't include any colorless cards in this list. So, Mind's Eye is one that I will put in a lot of my mono white decks. Cosmos Elixir is another new one that you can use. I didn't include any cards like that. This is only cards that specifically are white, and it's a top 5 because that's pretty much it, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, it's not a great list. I didn't put any cantrips in here. I didn't put anything like Wall of Omens in here that does draw you a card, but anything that's just sort of a one-shot or it just replaces itself, that's not really card draw, so I didn't put that in here. It needs to be repeatable. You need to draw a bunch of cards off of it in order for it to be actually card draw, I think. But I do have some honorable mentions though. Before I get to the top 5, Alms Collector is one that, it's very conditional. It's sort of like a bad notion thief, really. You really need to, your opponents need to be drawing a lot of cards. It really depends on your opponents a lot. If your opponents are drawing lots of cards, then you'll draw cards, right? And it doesn't even work with something like Heuristic Study, because Heuristic Study is just one at a time. This has to be 2 or more. So if your opponent has a Heuristic Study out and they're drawing a ton of cards off of it, you're going to get nothing out of that. So it's very conditional. It is a way to draw cards. It's not really, it actually can just sit there and do nothing for you though. So that's why I didn't include it in the list. Martyr's Cry is another one I've talked about in my 10 cards you should be putting in your commander decks videos. There's actually a few on this list, obviously, from those videos. And this is one that, maybe it's not completely intuitive, but you use this on yourself is the thinking I had, right? That's what I talked about in the video is if you're playing like a Darien deck, for example, you got a whole bunch of tokens. This can be 2 mana, draw 10 cards or whatever, right? You exile all your white tokens and you just draw a ton of cards. So it can be really good that way. But again, I didn't really include cards like this because it's super conditional and also a one-shot, so I didn't really include it on the list. And then also Inspiring Commander. This is another honorable mention, and the reason it's an honorable mention, and I've talked about this card a couple times on my channel already, this is actually really good. This would probably be at the top of this list, maybe 1 or 2 on this list if it was, it's not technically a legal commander card or a legal, I don't know how you want to word it, but it's an arena card. Why Wizards of the Coast would make a card, there's a few of them, that only can be played on arena and nowhere else, I think is absurd. I won't get too far into this, but, and I had a guy, I think on my Goat Tribal video, which this card I put in, he commented about how it's not paper legal and all that. I'm like, who cares? Like, Rarity is not a legal commander. Okay, but I think Mitch from Commander's Quarters has a Rarity commander deck, right? I talked about how I had an Ink Treader Nephilim deck. An Ink Treader Nephilim is not a legal commander. There's lots of that kind of stuff going on in the format already. I would never have a problem with someone playing this card in their commander deck, proxying it obviously, but there's a lot of that going on in the format already. So that's why it's an honorable mention on this list, because it definitely would make the list if there wasn't some sort of legal nuances involved, right? So getting to the actual list. Coming in at number 5, Armistice. And this one, obviously nobody's going to get blown away by any of these cards, right? We're talking about white card draw here, okay? But these are the options you have, all right? Armistice is one, again, used to get played in Commander. I won't say a lot, but it was played from time to time. It was reprinted in Commander 2014. Again, for that reason, Wizards of the Coast was like, okay, here's some cards that people are starting to play in the format. Let's reprint them. And this was one of them because it was an option for white players to draw cards, right? 5 mana, you get to draw a card and target opponent gains 3 life. 5 mana is kind of a lot. It's a lot to draw a card. Keep in mind though, this is repeatable. You can just keep dumping mana into this to draw more cards. The opponent gaining a life thing, that's not, it's not that significant, right? You can just pick the player that has the least life maybe, or the player who You don't care if they have lots of life. So this just becomes 5 mana draw card, which is not terrible. It's not great, obviously, but it is a repeatable draw effect in white. Coming in at number 4, Pursuit of Knowledge, and this is another one that I talked about in one of my 10 cards videos. Just on its face, okay? So if you would draw a card, you put a study counter on Pursuit of Knowledge instead, right? That's a replacement effect, so you're not going to be drawing that card. And then once you have 3 study counters on it, you can remove them at instant speed, obviously, to draw 7 cards. So it essentially boils down to you skip 3 draws to draw 7 cards, so you're netting 4 cards, right? This is 4 mana for 4 cards, which is really, really good, especially in white. However, there's a risk there, right? There's a risk that you just sit there. And I mean, obviously, if you're in mono white, you're not really drawing a lot of cards already. So you're going to sit there and not draw cards for 3 turns in a row. It's risky. It's really risky. If you can have another one of these effects out, like it'd be great if you had, say, Martyr's Cry, for example. Martyr's Cry, you pop that, draw 3 cards with it, and then you immediately get 3 counters on your Pursuit of Knowledge because you're going to skip those 3 draws, right? And then you end up getting the 7 cards. So if you can have another effect, and I know it seems counterintuitive almost, but if you can have another effect that also draws cards to speed this up, it's kind of good. It's a bit of a risk. Maybe people feel sorry for the mono white deck, and it's a bit of a dickhead move to the poor mono white player who can't draw cards, and right before he puts his 3rd study counter on his Pursuit of Knowledge, you destroy it. I mean, come on, leave the poor guy alone. Let him draw his 7 cards. Coming in at number 3, Dawn of Hope, and this one is conditional. A lot of these are conditional with white, right? If you're drawing cards in white, it's going to be conditional. There's not a lot of, which maybe is why Armistice is maybe better than people think, because there is 0 conditions. You just can draw cards with that, and there's no conditions around it at all other than just paying mana. Dawn of Hope is a lot less mana, but also conditional. I mean, the upside of Dawn of Hope is you don't actually need a life gain deck, right? So whenever you gain life, you can pay 2 to draw a card. However, it does have that other ability where you pay 4 to create a white soldier creature token with lifelink. So this can just draw you cards on its own, because you can create a soldier token, attack with it. When it connects, you'll gain life, and you can pay 2 to draw cards. So you can just draw cards with this on its own. That's really bad though, because now you're paying 6 to draw a card essentially. I guess maybe once you actually get 1 soldier token out, maybe then you can just keep reusing that soldier token, but now you're really playing with fire because it's going to die so easily. Obviously in a life gain deck, like I have this in my Patron of the Kassoon deck, and it is pretty darn good. Okay, 2 mana to draw a card is pretty darn good. Conditional, yes. I mean, I'll be quite honest. I have a few of these cards in my Patron of the Kassoon deck, and I have no problem drawing cards. I really do keep a fairly full hand in that deck. Coming in at number 2, Inheritance, another card I talked about in one of my 10 cards videos. This is just 1 mana, okay, and it's going to sit there. Whenever a creature dies, you may pay 3 if you do draw a card. And I talked about in that video, this is very comparable to Dawn of Hope. So they're both triggered abilities. They're both relying on things to happen, and then you have to pay mana and you draw a card. Dawn of Hope is way more conditional. As I've said many times, Inheritance, you don't have to build your deck around. You just stick it on the battlefield, and people are going to be sacrificing their Sakura Tribe Elders and all that other kind of stuff, and you're going to get those triggers anyway. You just have to make sure you leave up the mana. That's the only downside, right? You basically, when you have this on the table, almost want to be leaving 3 mana up all the time, because you don't want to miss that trigger where you have a chance to draw a card. So, it's not great. I think, honestly, though, might be better than Dawn of Hope, because there's almost no conditions on here. The fact that a creature has to die, it's going to happen all ton in a commander game anyway, especially again now with the commanders dying trigger, right? They actually do die before they go to the command zone. So that's going to be included in this. So that just gives you a lot more opportunity to use it. It's a little mana intensive, but again, we're in mono white here. You're not going to put this in your Azorius deck, and you're not going to put this in your Orzhov deck probably, but you're probably in a mono white or maybe a Boros deck. This is definitely worth giving consideration. And coming in at number 1, Mentor of the Meek. This one, again, I don't see a ton. I'm surprised. Another card that used to get played a lot got printed in Commander 2014, got printed in Commander 2016. It's gone to the wayside a little bit. It is very conditional. I suppose, whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 if you do draw a card. So again, just like with Inheritance, just like with Dawn of Hope, it is a triggered ability that you then have to pay for, but this is the cheapest of the bunch. Okay, this is only 1 mana. You know, that it's not hard to leave up 1 mana, and you can plan around it because it's you're not waiting for a creature to die or anything. This is something that you plan around. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to cast a creature, and I have Mentor of the Meek in a couple decks. I actually have 2 mono white decks, and I have Mentor of the Meek in both of them, and you just plan around it. You basically just wait an extra turn. You know, if I'm playing my Patron of the Kitsune deck, and I know I'm going to cast my Opali, okay, I wait until I have 4 mana. Right, I'm going to wait until I have 4 mana so that I can cast it and then pay the extra 1 to draw a card, because it's worth it to me to wait to cast that, right? So that's why I think this is the best one, because you really can just engineer it so that you're always drawing cards off of this. Also, it is not non-token. Okay, this is token creatures as well. So now if, for example, you have your Dawn of Hope, you can pay the 4 mana, make a 1/1 token, and then Mentor of the Meek will trigger, and you can pay 1 more and draw a card off of that, right? It's really, really easy to include this in a mono white deck. This is a powerhouse in some decks. Again, I talked about Darien. In a Darien deck, this is an absolute powerhouse, right? Because you're making 1/1 tokens like crazy. You just got to leave all that mana up. By the way, Inspiring Commander, which, again, I said if it was a perfectly legal card, it probably would be number 1 on this list. Imagine that in a Darien deck. Yeesh. So anyway, that is it for today. That is the top 5 card draw cards in white. Again, if you're just playing a mono white deck, here are your options. This is what you have to deal with. This is really all there is, I'm afraid to say. So I hope this video is helpful. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.